Up to this point, we've been working with the various logical functions with if in them using hard-coded references. So for example, we would do SUMIF. We're going to SUMIF this range is greater than 200,000, and that's what we're going to sum up. All right, so in this case, that 200,000 is hard-coded. It's not controlled by a dynamic input cell. It gives us the right answer, but that's not really what we want. Because what happens is if I change this 200,000 to, for example, to 300,000, my if statement's changed, but my SUMIF will not. And that's because here I'm having trouble. I can't directly reference this cell. So that's going to cause a problem for us. So we have a way around this, but before we get there for SUMIFs, I do want to emphasize that our if functions updated just fine. And that's because in this case, we don't have to specify in the criteria that this whole thing is in quotation marks. Right? When it's in quotation marks, that tells it that it's a string variable or a set of words, basically, which they require for the SUMIF and the SUMIFs and the other functions, but if actually does not need that style of referencing. All right, so how do we get around this in our SUMIF? So the way it's going to work is that we have to know how to put together a set of string variables together. All right, and the function that works for this is concatenate. So concatenate puts various text strings together. For example, if I want to put greater than with the number 200,000, I have the first greater than in quotations, then 200,000 in quotations, and it gives me greater than 200,000. So it created that string for me by putting two words together. So another example of how we can combine words together here is you can actually come in here and use words like first. Let's do first and name. Those get concatenated together or joined together to make first name. Now you might want to put a space in there, and if so, you put a space between the quotation marks. Now we have first space name, and we've put that string together. Now we want to put together a string criteria that we can use in the logical function. So let's go back to what we had before with our greater than. And once we have that, now we can directly reference the cell. Now we can come over and directly reference F3, and in this case it takes the number in there, which is 300,000, and attaches it as a string to our greater than value. So at this point we now have a string created, where if we come in here, instead of referencing F3, we can reference the string we put together down here, and we get the right answer back. We can verify it's the right answer by summing it up over here, checking with our if functions, and we get the same answer either way. If we change this back to 200,000, we can see that now our function has become dynamic. And that's really important because we're going to be able to use it in more interesting ways to get out valuable information. And I'll show you an example in just a second. Before I do, though, I want to show you how we can put this concatenate actually inside of the SUMIF function. One way is to literally copy the concatenate. But concatenate is a big formula to type, and there's actually a shorter way to do it. The way we can do concatenate in a short form is within the equals sign, we can put things in quotes, and then use the ampersand key. Right? That's going to be Shift 7, and that ampersand key functions the same way as concatenate. It's going to put these things together in the exact same way, and it's just going to be a little shorter form, whether we type concatenate with arguments between commas, or if we use the ampersand, it's going to give us the same result. So now if we go back to our cell, in D3 I can replace this with greater than ampersand F3. And now I've eliminated my middle steps, and I still have a dynamic function that's going to change as I change that input cell. All right, so that's all well and good. How does this actually work in reality if we want to do a real calculation that matters? Well, one thing that you'd be interested in a portfolio of loans, and let's get rid of some of this stuff, is what percentage of the loans are late, are in default, or say have a loan status of 0. All right, so we're going to break down our portfolio into these three groups, and we're going to do it with that SUMIF function. So what we're interested in summing, or our criteria range, which comes first, is the loan status. So we're going to do the loan status. Our criteria, we're going to directly reference whether it's 0, late, or default. And for our sum range, we're going to sum up the loan amounts. So once we've set this formula up, notice that I've locked all of my cell references except for the criteria, because I'm going to want the criteria to move as I copy this down. Because it's going to show me that I have 2.4 million that's 0 or on time. I'm going to have 825,000 that is late, and 103,000 that's in default. So now I've used my SUMIFs to get meaningful information about my loan portfolio. Alternatively, we could also look at loan statuses, or sorry, loan amounts. So we could try to break our loan into groups based on 100,000, 200,000, or 300,000. This is where our ampersand is going to be important. And so in this case, let's do a SUMIFs. We want to know criteria range, sum range. We're going to do our loan amount. Criteria range, we're also going to condition on our loan amount. And our criteria now, we're going to put in quotes. We're going to say greater than or equal to, ampersand, and now our loan amount, our criteria threshold, basically. So when we have that and we close our parentheses, we can now copy that formula. And we can see now how much of each loan amount is, how much of our portfolio is greater than $100,000, how much is greater than $200,000, how much is greater than $300,000. So we only had to write one function, but we were able to copy it down because the input into that function was changing, which again we use with the quotations and the ampersand to effectively concatenate these strings together.